This week on JW Fusion, we have an amazing show.
We have our spiritual leader, Dr. Robb Thompson, joining us again in the studio.
We are so excited because we're going to be talking about what is man. You don't want to miss it.
Stay tuned.
This week on
JW Fusion.
Blowing in from the Windy City, it's time for JW Fusion with your hosts, James and Wendy B.
Babe, we have a great show this week.
Exciting.
We have an amazing show this week.
Deep show.
We have our pastor,
Yeah,
our
spiritual
shepherd,
leader.
Dr. Robb Thompson.
Welcome to the show.
You guys are amazing. Well, so great.
we
So
feel
great
that
to
about
be
you.
here with you. I'm so excited about not only your show, but what you're doing and how you're helping people. And I think probably we're going to get into that today a little bit.
Yes,
So that's
yes.
going to
We're
work
gonna get
out.
all
Yes.
in it.
Really, yeah. We're going to jump right in the middle of that pool.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited. So thank you for all that you two do.
Thank you.
To be able to help others, and because your encouragement to other people means the world. And I think when we finally get into what is man, who he is,
Yeah.
why he is,
Yeah.
what God made him to be,
Yes.
and what God expects
Yes.
out of what he's created, I think that you'll understand your parts even in a greater way.
Oh,
than
wow.
everyone.
Thank you. Look forward to
you
that.
know what, baby, this is Christmas in March.
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's
I'm ready
unpack
for-
some stuff.
Well, Pastor Robb, Dr. T.
Let's put up some decorations. I just want some decorations.
It's something we just can't see it.
Right.
So, Pastor Robb, unpack that. What is man to God and the Son of Man that God visit? What is it about mankind that we are significant and precious in the sight of God?
Man actually was created by God to be the ruler of his remote office.
Okay, I like that.
That's
He
good.
was
Wow.
he actually was groomed for the job.
Okay,
But I think that as you look at that, man was created by God to be the only thing that could communicate to God on God's level when man accepted and celebrated the things God said.
okay,
There was never a challenge in the garden, if you remember, until the moment that man chose to believe something and someone else
okay.
other than God himself. But I think one of the things, let's kind of go back a little bit and let's look at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's look at it for the reason what God did, and actually looking at what he did to be able to explain to us what it all means.
Okay.
And that is that God actually had this ball of whatever it was that was spun out into nothing. And all of a sudden, God chose this planet out of every other planet in any of existence anywhere that none of us even know anything about.
Yes.
And what he did was he chose that, and the Spirit of God hovered over the waters when it was without form and void and said, "Light be." And then, of course, there was light. God took 7 days, however you want to say it, 7 hours, 7 days, 7 months, 7 years, 70 years, 700 years,
7,000
years,
Yeah.
you know, from that, because people kind of start adding up.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
this is about 7,000
Yeah.
years. Well, okay. Well, no matter how many years, none of that really matters. It's actually just a mental stroking. It has nothing. It means nothing. And for me, the only things in life that mean anything are the ones that cause greatness to come out of another.
So you're saying for you, the most important thing in your life is what you contribute to another person's greatness.
And I think that really is what God's design was.
That's awesome.
Now,
Yeah.
here you have these, the darkness is over the deep, the waters everywhere, then land, comes out of the waters, it peaks up out of the waters, and then all of a sudden, the next thing we see is God planted a garden eastward in Eden.
Yes.
In Eden. Now, here's the thing. Out of anything else, the Bible never said that God really did anything. But he planted this garden, and in this garden, at that time, God put man. Now, I have a question. What would you think for a moment if man needed to look at himself as though he were a plant to discover really how he himself functioned? Because what screws up a man is his head,
Yeah.
his thoughts,
Yeah.
his thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of our disagreements have been, intellectual. All of our disagreements have nothing to do with fact. They have nothing to do with truth. But I say they have nothing to do with fact because facts can be skewed.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So they have little to nothing to do with fact. And no matter what, you understand the term the zero-sum game, which is just one side has 1 point and the other side has 0 points. And so it's not, everybody cannot be a winner in life.
Okay.
That there's always a level of winning in everything that we do, whether it's today or whether it's extended winning
Yeah.
in the future, or there's a certain amount of loss today that will actually cause us to win somewhere down the road of life. But let's say for a moment that man was planted in the garden the same way that the plants were. So if I look at myself like a plant, I ask myself the question, can I actually flourish by knowing what a plant needs or by receiving everything a plant needs in order for it to flourish? We know even to this day, plants respond to words.
Yes. Yes.
Animals respond to words.
Yes.
People respond
Yes.
to words.
Yes.
And so with all of that, the thing that we must keep in mind is that man thinks he's something he's really not.
Ah.
He actually was opened up to the knowledge of evil. And now he runs around in his head, always trying to see and to discover the different motives of others.
Wow.
He lives through his life attempting to be able to find out what's wrong with someone else. Because that, if I can discover what's wrong with someone else, then that's what can make me
Okay.
flourish. But if we saw ourselves as a plant, whether it be in the book of Genesis, whether it be in the book of Deuteronomy, where Moses said, "Today I set before you this choice, life and death, blessing and cursing." He said, "But now this is what you choose, so that you and your descendants may live." So God plants this garden. Man is in it. And as man's in it, he begins to eat some poison. And the moment that he eats the poison, he dies. The moment, or through all of those years, whether it be millions or hundreds or whatever, he was able to flourish based upon what he was eating. God came down into the garden in the cool of the day. God fellowshiped with him. God actually caused him to be able to recognize who he was and who he was in the life of God. But then familiarity came into man's life. Where it came from, how it came, was only the introduction of the poison that had been going on from the serpent from eternity past. And anytime a person listens to anything other than what will build them up, they begin to die.
So what I hear you saying is for us as believers, because we are supposed to be a reflection of Christ, who was God's only begotten Son. We are supposed to be a reflection of him. Once we're born again, we have a new life, a new beginning. And so the biggest problem that like in my own life, as you know, I shared with you, the biggest issue that I had in my life were things that were outside of the truth of God, or what God would have me to consume, or what he would have nourished me. I had my own ideas that I gotten from the environment.
Sure.
And so as you're saying in the garden, and as you said, the garden, it said God planted. It was only two things God physically, he planted a garden and he formed man. Everything else he
created the world, but he planted the garden.
Yeah, he planted the garden, which is different. When you plant something, there's great care that goes in. There's preparation and so forth. And I would go so far as to say he might have put more work in the garden than he did in creating the man.
Well, from our perspectives, we know it was more sweat.
Yeah.
I mean, we do
Yeah.
know that. And I think that if man could actually look at himself from the outside and see, isn't it funny how people can actually see that when they go to put their makeup on? When they go to get their hair done? When they go to the gym? They can see that. But they can't see that from their core. And that's why from the moment that they're born, they begin to die.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know? But God always desired for us to be able to have the fertilizers of life. That if we would stand back, we would see that man has needs. Those basic needs that humans have now discovered. You know, the need of belonging, the need for care, the need to be heard, you know, the need of significance, not necessarily just importance.
Yes.
You know, they all of these different needs, the basic human needs that people have in life were all there that God wanted others to bring that nourishment to the person that he really did plant in that garden. And then they walk together. The difference between the plants, and the only difference between the plant and Adam just so happened to be that those plants were stationary.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And isn't it funny to you? This is just kind of interesting, but you've got me out in the cosmic already. So
Well, come on.
But isn't it interesting to you that the only thing that they don't care of whether or not it has feelings is plants.
Right.
They don't care if they abort kids. They don't care
Yeah.
because they know internally that they've been planted here. They're the planting of the Lord that he may be glorified. You know, I mean, so I think if what we can do as leaders and as believers realize that the stimulus that we give ourselves is what determines the outcome of our lives. What did God think of man? God saw him better, more equipped, better groomed even than the angels of God.
Yeah.
He saw man as one that he actually could walk with and he could trust. But what we have is that we have then the familiarity which entered. Familiarity also enters a person's relationship with God.
Yeah, yeah.
They stop fearing God. And what they do is that they begin to fear itself.
You know, what I've observed is, which started me on this path of writing my last book, I saw the principles of the Bible that are present in so many different other texts, various parallels. There's a creation parallel in the Vedas and some Zoroastrian text from thousands and thousands of years ago, and they take the principles that are in the Bible that I believe God put in the earth to nourish us, and these principles are. That's why you said the words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. There wasn't a New Testament at that time.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, all they had was the Torah. So the words that he spoke from the Old Testament, primarily Deuteronomy. He quoted a lot, and so.
Jesus' favorite book.
Yeah, and so when
that the Sadducees wanted nothing to do with. Yeah.
So what I see happening right now today is people wanting to take the principles, but leave the source of the principles, who holds them morally accountable. They want the benefits of God's word. They want the benefit of the principles, because I have studied it out, and I've seen that science is throughout Scripture.
Oh, yeah.
That science and scientists, people who were 20 years ago atheists, agnostics, have become believers because of the research they've done, and they see how the Bible is tied in to physics and quantum mechanics and so forth. But there are still those who want to take those principles but leave Jesus off the table, leave becoming born again or accepting him as your Lord.
Well, there's something there, James, that you need to know, is that anything in life has two sides. Has a front side, has a back side, has an east and has a west.
Yeah.
The gospel also has two sides. One side is the person of Jesus. The person of Jesus creates your peace. But the principles of Jesus are what make you like God. You see, Jesus is great for the great by and by, but it's the principles of God, the ones that you've discovered, those ancient tracks,
Yes.
that have been laid down, that people don't believe, that they think that they can actually make it be a different way. That in one way we can say, that America has become such a great nation, but there is one problem, is that in men, the very same thing that occurred at the Tower of Babel is the very same thing that men will try to create again.
It is.
Men without God, because they're attempting to be God on their own. So what do? We take care of everybody. We make sure everybody's got this. We make sure everybody's got this. We make sure everybody's got this.
Yeah.
And we live our lives believing that every one of those things belong to us. Instead of having God as our source, we now have transformed, or we've translated into where men are our source. And that's where the poison
That same
of
poison.
the serpent, it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
But remember, the gospel has two sides. The life of God and the law of God. One is the king, Jesus the king.
Yes.
But the principles are the kingdom.
Yes. Yeah. That's good.
That's very good.
And once you are aware of those things, you can see yourself as, okay, I'm a plant. What does a plant need to grow? It needs sunlight. It needs moisture. It needs to be primped. It needs attention. it needs to be celebrated. Because if you neglect your garden, look what happens to your garden.
Yes.
You know, it's a funny thing, because if you remember in the book of Genesis chapter 3, approximately verse number 18, where it said, "And the ground is cursed because of you." So now we're dealing with a cursed ground wanting to exhibit and to experience the principles that God gave Adam in the kingdom. So every time, that's why Paul turned around and said that every time I go to do good, evil
Always present.
is present with me.
Yeah, yeah.
So we just need to realize, people go, oh man, one thing happens and then, man, I just get through this thing and then another thing happens. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. You all of a sudden, you've now begun to discover your need for God, because God will never he'll never give you a life that makes him unnecessary to the equation. He will not allow your ability to be able to create wealth, because he gave you that power.
Yeah.
But now, why is it that there's a bunch of lost people that are wealthy? Because they accepted the principles of Jesus without accepting the person of Jesus.
Well, in the 4th chapter of Luke and Mark, when Jesus was being tempted, Satan told him that I can give you this because it's been delivered unto me. Now, when Jesus was resurrected, he took that back. But Satan still illegally operates, and he illegally deceives people and tell them, hey, you can have this. And because a person agrees and gives their will to that, that's half the thing there, because they believe that. That's what they believe. That's what they choose.
Well, I tend to kind of add to what you're feeling. I tend to think that the very same thing that came from the book of Hebrews, which said that in Hebrews chapter 2, where it says that we have not yet seen all things put under his feet.
Right.
What is man? Because remember that in Psalm 8:6 says, that God, you have placed all things under his feet. Well, yeah, but that's where Hebrews comes back and says, and yet we still have not seen all
Right.
things put under his feet. Now, it's almost kind of like this. You paid for your car, but let's say this morning I had to rent a car on Turo for a trip I have to take. So I actually put in my dates. I actually paid for the car, but I can't have that car
Okay.
until that date.
Well, that's the very same thing that happened in Isaiah. It says, surely he has borne our griefs and
Yeah.
has. So it's prophetic. God has already done it, but we haven't come to that on the wheel of time. Was that be a good way to put
Yes,
that?
and we must always remember that the wheel of time grinds very slowly,
I know.
but very
I know.
but very surely.
Yeah.
It's very direct about how it grinds. It grinds to the point of powder everything that gets to it. That's why that it is that nourishment of that plant that causes man to live above the circumstances of the world. Because Ephesians 2:5-6 says, and he has raised us up together with him. He's raised us up. Where did he raise us up? He raised us up above the principalities and powers,
Yes.
against the rulers of this dark world and against spiritual wickedness in high places. And he gave unto us the whole armor of God,
Yes.
that we may be able to stand in the evil day. And having overcome all, we stand. We've overcome all. But remember, we're here as God's representatives. We are here as ambassadors. 2 Corinthians 5:20 says that now then are we ambassadors for Christ. We are here to represent his kingdom. I have no opinion. I have no thoughts. And you must labor to get rid of your thoughts. And that's the hardest thing in life that you'll ever do, because we have that 7,000 years of slow but sure mentoring to the things that are evil.
You know,
in life.
and that's so awesome the way you put that. That we don't know how long that time frame was, and we don't know. It's a lot of things we don't know, but what we do know from the scriptures is that we were given the opportunity to be reconnected to the Creator.
That's correct.
All right, we were reconnected because without that connection, we're spiritually dead. The connection to Him is spiritual life. So that pruning you mentioned that every plant has to have, that pruning is by attrition, we lose, well, we should lose those tendencies that you were talking about of wanting our own way, having our own thoughts, and allowing ourselves to be led by the Spirit of God, because as many as are led, our sons or offspring, or those that are connected in a familial sense, to look at it from an earthly perspective. When we do that, we become closer to what we were intended to be. Now, we may not get there in this body, but we are being prepared to be as close to that as possible. Would you say that that's an accurate assessment of the plan of God for humanity, that we are constantly dying daily, which means being separated daily from our own wishes and wants and our own desire to seek after the poison of the world system, or looking at covetousness, which is huge. I don't want your life. I just want your stuff. I like my life. I like who I am, but I want your stuff. So that's something that needs to be cut away to accept who we are. Like I shared with you, I had to cut away some of what I thought to become more of what I believe God would desire me to be. So would you say that's an accurate journey for many people? Because I imagine that there are people who wonder, why is it I take 2 steps forward, 3 steps back? That's what they call balling the jack. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that what you're mentioning is tremendously valuable. I would add to it in this way, that once an individual understands the premise or the base from which they proceed, every one of the things that you said becomes true. But it's not the truth. The truth is that you no longer are alive. That's the truth. Now, people can't reconcile that.
Yes.
As far as God is concerned, he said, the Apostle Paul told us, he said, with Christ I have been crucified. He, on the road to Damascus, went from Saul to Paul. But people, humans, could not understand it. They could not accept it. Because he was such a persecutor of the church and everyone knew it. The religious people knew it, and the non-religious people knew when they saw people being dragged by their hair out of their house and into prison for what they believed. Now, what happens to us as individuals is that we come to the place to where the moment we receive Christ is the moment that we need to learn how to die in grace, not just gracefully.
Oh.
But to die in grace.
Okay, listen, we're going to take a break right there because I want you to open that up. Dying in, I don't think I've ever heard that.
No.
And I listen very carefully to what you preach. But I don't know if I've ever heard you say that. That is deep.
Those kinds of places do not lend themselves to allow you to say things like this.
Okay. Well, look, we're going to take a break. This is part 1 of What is Man? And we'll be back after this message.
You're listening to JW Fusion with your hosts, James and Wendy B.
And we're back with part 2 of What is Man in the Sight of God with Dr. Robb Thompson, our awesome senior leader at Family Harvest Church in Tinley Park. It's a great church. You should come check it out. Come visit. The Word of God is amazing there. And it's some great people.
Great group. The family. It's a good family.
It's a family.
Yeah.
It's a family. That's what drew us there,
Yeah,
Pastor Rob,
from the
was
beginning.
It was the people we encountered that were
From
just
the door.
Yeah,
to
it
the
was just so
inside.
nice.
Yeah. Just
And
welcoming.
We were like, wow, I like this place. We hadn't even heard you preach yet. I'd heard you preach years ago, but we came and the people were so welcoming.
I used to know something. Now I know I don't know anything. That was when I used to know something.
Well, I tell you what, there'd be some people who would do well not to know what you don't know.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah.
That part's true.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, but I wanted you to talk further about dying in grace. Open that up for us.
The whole idea of the New Testament is that we walk by faith and not by sight. As we approach that term, walking by faith and not by sight, it's preceded with, we have this light affliction, which is but for a moment. When the Apostle Paul talked about his light affliction, he talked about being stoned to death. He talked about being dead a day and a half. He talked about being shipwrecked 3 times. He talked about being let down on the side of a wall in a basket.
Yeah.
Because of the people who said they loved him. He had to do that. And so he was a person that lived his entire life resisted by everyone that he spoke to.
Wow.
And the term dying gracefully has to do with people who come to the place to where they begin to settle into what others want them to believe. And the moment you no longer become a threat to changing their belief systems, they'll leave you alone at that moment. But a person that dies in grace is where the Apostle Paul said in Philippians chapter 3, verse number 10, he said, "For my determined purpose is that I may know him, and I would know the power of his resurrection, but I would also fellowship his sufferings." Grace, as we've mentioned before, is God giving to you all that you don't deserve,
Yeah. Yeah.
while his mercy is keeping you from all of the things that you do deserve. You know,
Yeah.
grace and mercy, one is empowerment, the other one is holding back the law of that plant
Yeah.
of sowing and reaping. So if I continue to plant inside here, God's grace, what? By the stripes of Jesus, you're made well. That even though my body is perishing, yet my inside man is being renewed day by day. These things that I face will work for me. A far more and exceeding eternal weight of glory as long as I don't look at them. You don't look at the things which you see,
Okay.
but you look at the things which he said. For the things which you see are temporary.
Yeah.
And God is so broken over what you and I have had to face. He never put us or planted us in the garden for this to happen to us. He never wanted this. But now what we face is we face a life that's filled with believing the garden garbage instead of believing the one who prunes us to live again. And that becomes huge. So when a person dies in grace, they're dying having become conformed to the image of every one of the promises of God. Remember, worry, fear, discontent is an insult to the promises of God.
Wow.
It's slander, goes greater. It actually is the thing that says those things are not true. What God has said is not so. And that's exactly where Lucifer wants you and I to be. Because we are the only thing that can slow God down. There's only, and I've mentioned this before, and it's funny. There is only one will that is greater than God's will for your life, and that's yours. Your will trump God's will. Why is it? Because you are only going to live 100 years.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know why anybody wants to live to be 120. We're not there yet. We're not there. And plus, you may live to be 120, but the people that were the generation behind you are dying by the time that they're 70.
Yeah.
Because of all that they have to tolerate, And so dying in grace is different than dying gracefully.
Okay.
There are many people who can die gracefully. You think that this person's very graceful, but you don't know what they think, and you don't even know what they believe.
Yeah.
But a person who dies in grace is the one who celebrates the adorning, the ornamenting, and the decorating of how God was now going to cover every one of the things that were thrust upon us when we were in that ground. Because remember this, the future of the plant is dependent upon the quality of the ground that it's sown in.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So,
Yeah.
so as you were talking about that, especially when you said planted within, the Bible refers to us as earthen vessels. And I've always...
And remember the ashes to ashes and dust to dust thing. Too,
actually. And we made from the dust of the ground. And the thing I thought about is the way that every war that's ever been fought has been over land.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it's been over land. I used to be in real estate finance. I used to be a real estate investor. I owned a lot of properties. I did a lot of loans for people. And that business is the most difficult thing I've ever done, is transferring a piece of land from one person to another. You have a situation where both people want this land.
Right.
I want to sell it. I want to buy it. Why is it so difficult? Why is it so hard? Even when there's no financing involved, if I'm paying you cash for your land, there's still a fight involved. So what I began to notice was that we are the territory that Satan fights for. He wants us as territory. Because I remember one night I asked the Lord, because I had been demon possessed. So I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, why does the Bible talk about that spirit going back to that house which it came out of? And the Lord told me, he goes back to that house because the strong man says, go back and get that territory that you lost. And what I saw was, then I began to understand why those same spirits would come back every now and then. Anybody home? Is there an echo? Is there anything in there? I experienced that right away. When I got delivered, nobody led me to the Lord. So within a couple of hours, those spirits came right back worse than they were the first time. So I experienced that.
Isn't that amazing how they come back worse? They bring their cousins.
Yeah, they do, because this time because they got to hold on. And the Lord showed me that. Then I began to understand there's a significance about land ownership. Even in us as human beings, we don't understand the spiritual aspect of it. We see it politically, we see it economically, but I don't think governments see the spiritual component of the wars that are fought over land. Israel and Palestine, for example.
Sure.
You know? And so when you said that, it helped me to even see more clearly how vital it is for me to understand what I am to God, because he gave so much for this piece of land, this territory, this earthen vessel, for me to live the way he designed me to be, as opposed to how the environment has tried to teach me to live. They're teaching children certain things that children shouldn't be taught now, you know, in the value system, and even in a lot of churches. They're not preaching dying. You don't hear about dying. You don't hear about that. You hear about prosperity. You hear about abundance. You
Sure.
hear about success. You hear about motivation, inspiration, which are good things. But when you lose the importance of the life of God in you, you lose something.
Well, it's an interesting thing, but everything about God is balanced. Proverbs 18:1 says that a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. And Romans chapter 1, the book of Hebrews in several spots, but he will say, behold the goodness and the severity of God. Without a person understanding the severity of God, they can never understand the goodness of God. You'll never be able to understand what God has done for you until you understand what God has also kept you from experiencing or he has released you from.
Wow.
Yeah, the first thing that a person must understand is the reason why Jesus died. He died because of you. He didn't die for him.
Right.
He died for you. He died because of all the things that I don't know about you. But immediately when it's spoken, they speak back to you again. But that's the reason why he died. And once you know that and you can focus on the goodness of that, you don't stay where you were. You now come over into where he is. So I don't want you to look at that. I want you to listen to me. I had to tell someone that all of us love, a minister from another part of the country. This morning I said to him, I said, Doctor, don't listen to that. Look at me. Just keep your eyes on me. Watch what I do. Watch how I'm acting. Watch what I'm doing with what belongs to you. Just watch that. Don't listen to the other things. He told me, he said, Doctor, I'm so grateful. I've lost so much. I can't trust anybody. I can't. And I said, look at me.
Wow.
Don't listen to that. Don't listen to that. I will never have a thought that does not have your benefit in mind. And with God, God has never had a thought that doesn't have our benefits in mind. He still sees me as he saw Adam in his creation.
Now that's powerful right there. That, because as you were talking, my mind went back to the scripture that says, I will forgive your sins and reassemble them no more.
Sure.
And what I did now maybe this is out there for some people, I don't know, but this is what I do for me. I believe that God exists in the everlasting now. He exists from everlasting to ever. He's in the past, in the present, and the future, all at the same time. I believe that. And when he forgives us, I believe he literally goes to that point in our lives and that thing is erased, eliminated, it no longer exists in his mind. It exists in our memories, and it exists in the mind of the accuser, in the records of the accuser, which he brings back to us. As if he can get you to buy into that, if he gets you to look into that, like you were just saying, don't look at that. I just had that, what you just said. I experienced that this week. Well, Lord, don't focus on that. You focus on what I'm telling you. You look at this. Those things are passed away. Passed away. When they say so and so, my uncle so and so, he was 98. He just passed away. It doesn't mean he just floated by. That thing no longer exists unless you bring it up again, like you just said.
Sure.
Until you bring it up and reassemble it, which is what remember means, to reassemble, that thing doesn't exist as far as God's concerned.
And there's a trick to it all. And the trick to it all is that not only do people want to remind you of where you are, but you also risk an arrogance by not remembering it. And what's very important is that you understand how to be able to keep those things in mind. But when you do, you only remember them from someone who no longer, from the perspective of someone who no longer exists. You see, the greatest attribute of Jesus was humility. He said, though he was equal with God, he did not think it to be robbery for that. But he made himself of no reputation and took upon himself the form of a servant and became obedient unto death. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and given him a name. It's in humility that you're raised up, not humiliation. A person who remembers their sins is humiliated. That's not humility.
Right.
Humility is me accepting what God said about me, regardless of the knowledge of my former actions to myself.
So it's the memory of your past. You're not reassembling it, but you have the memory of it, the lesson that you learned from it, minus condemnation. That's basically it.
Yeah.
Because I firmly believe.
Minus any responsibility, minus,
I have a debt to pay.
any conviction or criticism.
Right. Exactly. Okay. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
I think many people wrestle with that, right?
Yeah, I wanted to, I got to talk for the people who don't know the Bible like y'all do. We're talking about fear.
That's why I'm glad you're here.
Easy. I'm glad somebody's scratching here. I know a lot of people who are enveloped in their stuff, whatever the world has given them, their past, their fears, their worries. And it's easy to say God does not occupy the same space as fear. But someone who is so deep into it, they don't have someone that says, just look at me, just listen to me, just follow me. They're not necessarily in a place where they can hear God like, I'm just waiting for you to ask, and I got you. Speak to that person who has that fear, who has worry, who has stuff from the past that they are literally beating themselves up about.
People beat themselves up because they believe that they're so dirty that no one could ever love them.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the thing about God is that it's too late for you to talk God out of loving you. Because it's not like. He may not like you today.
Yeah.
But he'll fix that. But he loves you today. And I hope for the listeners that we're talking to that they can understand that it's where they're planted at the moment that reminds them of all the things that they're not. God's people are only called to remind people of who they are, not who they're not.
That's good.
So in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, I mean, the only reason why I would bring up a Bible verse is because Christians come to the point to where they tell you that, I don't believe that stuff. So no, wait a second. I don't say anything. I can't tell you where it came from. Because I really am watchful over how I represent God. I really am. And so in 2 Corinthians 6:16, he says, wherefore come out from among them with all of the things that have happened in people's lives, with everything that they're going through, with everything that they face. It's time to come out. Come out, because there's nothing in that. There is no future in your past.
Right. What's the first step? Like,
Yeah.
they're listening to us and they're like, yeah,
Well-
but what's that first step they can take to come out? They may not feel it's that easy to just come out.
To see yourself as valuable, to be better than the treatment you've been given and the way you've treated yourself and the way that you perceive that society has treated you. Because it doesn't matter. No matter what. Do you know, disappointment, discouragement, pressure, and all of the other things, you know, the prejudices that live everywhere. All you need to do is take a person and put them somewhere else, and the prejudices go away.
Yeah.
All you need to do is just take a person and put them somewhere else, and the prejudices come. I mean, when I go to Uganda or Nigeria or Kenya, I may be the only lighter-skinned individual that I'll see in 2 weeks. And so it is true, you know, hey, here's somebody who's, you know, he's kind of like he's the unique one. He's the one that doesn't seem like, you're not from here, are you? No,
Right.
I'm not.
Right.
I'm not. Well, and at first everybody loves that. But then what happens is that it's time for me to fit in. So we are separated not by race, but we end up becoming separated by culture. Because I don't know how to function in their culture. You know, they said, well, no. I said, well, you know, we can't say that. They go, here, you have to say that.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
You here you can't open the door for every person, because you'll never get away from the door all day long. You'll be there. The certain things that God's word lays down as far as courtesies are concerned, they don't live there yet.
Okay.
And so I many times go into these places and into several governments, and the thing that I do is that I will tell them to say, you want me to teach on excellence. I'll never forget the first time that a queen said to me, she leans over to me and she says, our land is very prosperous. We have the greatest amount of this particular deposit of mineral in the entire world. And all of my people sit on the ground because they're sitting there believing that they're prosperous, but they're not doing anything. Can you help me to teach them to act? And all that blessing will come upon their lives. And then I think it might have been even on the same trip. It was in another nation where I was speaking for the president of this nation. And the president's wife leaned over to me because I was sitting next to her at dinner. And she said to me, she said, if And all there were 250 business people and their spouses. Mm-hmm. They were the most prosperous in the country. She said, these are our top business leaders of our nation. And she said to me, if people would just do one thing that you said, our nation would turn around. And that it doesn't have to do with anything except people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Wow. I need to know how to make it here. I need to know how to be able to use social media as a platform. Mm-hmm. I need to know how to use good business principles. Mm-hmm. I need all of these different things that, Wendy, that you and James, that you know so much more than I know, but I'm not embarrassed by that. Mm-hmm. What I am is I'm grateful for that, that I know the people who do know, because we are all the planting of the Lord.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Because what is man that you would desire him? Because he made you. He made you as the crown of his entire creation to bring back his kingdom into this earth. And when we surrender to those thoughts is the moment when we truly come alive.
Wow.
That was powerful.
Pastor Robb,
that was powerful.
What I got to know is this, because our time is almost up. Were you able to teach those principles where they were received?
In that country.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I was.
That is awesome.
I was. One of the things that we do in one of the nations that I've gone into, and I've only been in 45 or 46, but
that's all.
But
you said only.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, compared to some people I know, but I have another job too. So, but one of the things that I even told some people, I mean, one of the first times I went into Nigeria, they handed me a new Nigerian outfit, and they're beautiful. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how the girls make their hats like that. I don't get it. But they can take one piece of cloth, one piece of silk, and they can make something out of it. Mm-hmm. And I have no clue. I mean, you sit behind them and you kind of you're trying to look around and everything. You're
very elaborate.
But they gave me this outfit, and they said to me, they said, will you put this on? We really want you to do this. And I said, no. And in front of, 5,000 or 6,000 people that were sitting there at the time, I said, no. And they said, why? And I said, because when you called me here, you didn't call me here to become like you. You called me here so that you could become like me.
Wow.
And sometimes you risk. That's a risk.
Yeah.
But it's a risk you must take.
You have to
if you're going to help people. Yeah. If you're going to help people, if you're going to break the back, because you go into nations and you go into churches, you go into people's lives.
Yeah.
You go into those people that have been caught, living and dying within a 2-block radius in a city. You go into their lives, and unless you can break the power of that thing that they're facing, they can never hear what you have to say.
Well, Pastor Robb, we thank you so much for joining us today. And as usual, you were amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
You guys are favorites.
Oh, thank you.
It's so good to see you.
He's our favorite guest, too.
So until next week, it's James H. Carpenter Barnes, and I'm here with
Wendy B.
And we'll see you next week.
Be blessed,
Be
everyone.
blessed.
You're listening to JW Fusion with your hosts, James and Wendy B.